Welcome back to Kitchen Table Care Chats, where we have real conversations with the people who are shaping the future of healthcare and long term care. Today, we're joined by two remarkable leaders whose work is changing the way we think about dementia, aging, and person centered care. Daphne Noonan, co founder of Person Centered Universe, has spent decades transforming long term care through leadership, education, and advocacy. Joining her is Jana Jones, whose career has been dedicated to creating meaningful experiences for older adults and supporting person centered approaches that honor every individual's story and dignity. In our conversation, we explore what person-centered care truly looks like in practice, why relationships matter just as much as clinical care, and how small shifts in perspective can transform the experience of residents, families, and care teams alike. Whether you're in healthcare, support a loved one living with dementia, or simply want to better understand how we can create more compassionate systems of care, this episode is full of thoughtful insights and practical takeaways. Please join us as we welcome Daphne and Jana to the kitchen table.
This Kitchen Table Care Chat is proudly brought to you by Surge Learning and CareLink. Surge Learning supports care teams by keeping staff engaged through career development, accessible policies, and clear insight into learning and performance trends. The focus is on helping teams feel confident, supported, and prepared in their roles. CareLink connects healthcare professionals directly with facilities, offering a flexible and efficient way to fill shifts with trusted, qualified staff. By simplifying staffing, CareLink helps teams focus more time on care and less time on coordination. Together, Surge Learning and CareLink support the people and systems that keep care moving forward.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the non-conventional kitchen table. We have Jana and Daphne here from PUC. They're here to talk about person-centered care and everything that has developed. So welcome, guys. We're really happy to have you.
Good morning.
Right. Yeah. So we're going to start off just to talk a little bit about yourselves and, how you guys met, because I love that story and I know it's, and we'll kind of start there. And then I would like to talk about how you guys started UC and kind of go from there.
Yeah. Well, so maybe I'll start and then
Yeah.
we can share a little bit about how we met. So sorry, my name's Daphne Noonan. Hi, everyone. And I am one of the co-founders of Person Centered Universe. But my background, which I'll talk about in a minute, but my background is in entirely long-term care. Started out my career many years ago, like more than 20 years ago now, in the therapeutic activity profession. And then gradually had continued my schooling through at St. Thomas University in New Brunswick, at the University of New Brunswick, to do a master's in adult education, and really just kind of shaped a keen interest in leadership roles. And so I've held some leadership roles in long-term care where I've been, managing departments or running as an executive director of a nursing home. But throughout all that, I just have really maintained just this keen interest. My passions are obviously person-centered care, and I have a special affinity for dementia care. But definitely my passion is culture. So you'll hear me talk a lot about organizational culture and how that, impacts kind of everything rises and falls on culture, in my opinion. And so that impacts obviously care, right? And when we're running organizations as busy leaders, I always say the question is not whether or not we want to work on culture, but because there is a culture, whether we like it or not, but is that culture the culture we want? Right? We kind of don't have a choice because the culture's there. But anyway, so as I mentioned, I co-founded Person Centered Universe with actually a friend of Jana and I, a dear friend of ours, Ashley King. And Ashley is currently still involved with Person Centered Universe, but more on a kind of a background level, because she's a busy CEO of a long a large long-term care organization here in New Brunswick. Yeah, I should probably say before I hand it over to Jana, and again, we'll talk a little more about PCU's story, I'm sure, as we go along in this virtual kitchen table chat. But I will just say that I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Prince Edward Island, which is where I'm coming to you from today. And also, I've lived most of my adult life in New Brunswick. So very much Atlantic Canadian, born and bred. And as we were talking just before we got rolling here, it's currently raining and everyone's waiting for the sun to come out so we can go to the beach.
Yes, we
Those are
are.
fingers.
Yes. And so sorry, my dyslexia got the both best of me. It's not PUC, it's the other
Right?
way. I was actually talking like, yeah, I didn't say that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
No problem.
Jana, a little bit about you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm so excited to be here this morning at your virtual kitchen table. I brought coffee with me and everything. Uh,
Perfect.
so my name is Jana Jones, and I was born and grew up in Moncton and moved to Fredericton, New Brunswick when I was in high school, and I've been here ever since. So I live here with my husband and three boys and a big sheepadoodle dog. So yes, I also have been in the long-term care industry for, I guess it's been about 20 years now. So I also went to St. Thomas University. I had a degree in gerontology and sociology. And funnily enough, Daphne and I met each other sort of like ships in the night in a way because we didn't quite know each other, but we had a class together, of course. And directly after I graduated from St. Thomas University, Daphne hired me for my first job in the long-term care industry in therapeutic recreation at a large nursing home here in Fredericton. And we've been friends and colleagues ever since. And I consider her one of my mentors over the years and value her and her friendship and mentorship so much. So it's been
Love
great to
it.
be able to work alongside her in different areas and avenues throughout the last 20 years, and just so excited to be working with her for her at PCU and all of the great work that we're doing, which I know we'll touch on a little bit more. So thanks for having me.
I should say that she's my favorite hire, one of my favorite hires I ever made.
Oh, you're putting
That's
that
on video.
public now. Are you?
And And as soon as I figured out that she was kind of like almost a free agent again and growing that family of hers and ready to get back, I was like, oh, okay, let's find something that Jana can do with us.
We like to joke that there's that meme that floats around about how if you're an introvert, you usually just end up with friends by having an extrovert that sort of adopts you and
Mhm.
takes you along places. That's kind of Daphne's my extrovert to
I
my
love
introvert.
it. I love it. I love that connection. That's great.
Amazing. So, can you guys tell us a little bit about person-centered universe? Like how it began, what was the vision?
Of course. Yeah, and I mean, I'll be interested, obviously, to hear Jana's perspective because we've never talked because she's been she was there in the founding moments and has kind of been along for the ride with Ashley and I ever since, in one way or another, even cheerleading from the sides when she was raising her little boys, who were teeny weeny at that time. But so as I mentioned, Ashley King is my co-founder, business partner. And she and I actually, she was working with me on that same team. I think it was when Jana was on mat leave, actually. I believe that she was hired to come in and work in that recreation department. And it was at a place in Fredericton called York Care Center, which is one of the largest homes in New Brunswick and very much a center of excellence. And they were going through a big culture transformation as well at that time. And um, so it was a busy place. And one day, so we used to get asked a lot to go speak in classes, like at St. Thomas University, at gerontology courses and things like that. And Ashley and I were driving in my car up the hill because in Fredericton, there's a massive hill that, to get up into the uptown area and like where campus is. And we just kind of, well, she tells it. I don't actually remember it exactly, but she tell you crystal clear that I just kind of looked at her and, knowing that she grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, both her mom and her dad and her grandmother, who was a mentor of hers. They were all, had small businesses, and just kind of musing about like our mutual passion for dementia care and person-centered care, I guess, although we may not have called it that at the time. But she would say that I just kind of looked at her and said like, would you ever want to start a business? Like kind of a side hustle where we're looking at education. And anyway, by the time we got to, that's the famous story, is by the time we got to the campus and we were on our way into the class, we were, for better or for worse, I guess, business partner married, and decided we were going to go off and do that. And so originally, what we did was because we both had full-time jobs and we were very happy where we were. And so we started PCU more as a labor of love. And it was around that passion for dementia, quality dementia care. And so we had learned of and were very interested in a program or a service that you could be trained in at through Bradford University in the United Kingdom, called dementia care mapping. The University of Bradford is kind of the home of like the pioneer of person-centered care, Dr. Tom Kitwood, and he was, this was one of his areas where he had developed this tool. Essentially, it's a quality metric tool, but it can also be used as a care planning tool, and it's a set of I guess, behavioral, metrics that you can measure residents with individuals who are living with dementia in care settings. You can measure their well-being or not well-being, and their mood, like, and their behavior. And so you measure these, in 5-minute increments. And so essentially, after you map, that for a few hours, you essentially end up with kind of a data set, which is like a literal footprint of what that person's experience is in a long-term care setting in the day. And so anyway, we had learned about this from a colleague at STU, and that was the first thing we did. We flew to Scotland and we became trained in dementia care mapping. And then when we came back and we ended up we were doing some mapping for different organizations in Atlantic Canada. And what we realized very quickly was, of course, we're doing the map, but then we're providing this information, right? The data. And then the first thing that these wonderful organizations would say to us is, okay, well, what now? So what training can you give us to help? And help us. And so we, of course, then started to develop education and training. And so anyway, all these years later, I don't know if I said we were founded in 2013. But what we've grown into really is a wonderful, I think, pretty fierce small business from Atlantic Canada, where we do provide services, all over the world, really, because a lot of what we do is remote. But we provide education and consulting services, and such as mapping or other types of executive consulting, things like that. Really, that we focus on all things, just making the world better for people who are impacted by dementia, but also, again, that person-centered care, delivery and everything. And so we essentially provide services to individuals who are living in communities, maybe walking a journey with a loved one or a friend with dementia, not in a care setting. We have services and courses for that. And then we also provide the same kind of education consulting to long-term care organizations or community organizations. And we're just having a ball. We love it.
We're just having a ball. I love it. It's like a party. Oh, I love the passion there. Honestly, I love the story. I love how you like probably pitched your business idea to the perfect person with her background with so many entrepreneurs in her family.
Yeah.
Like it was the perfect person to pitch it to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it grew from, again, a little side hustle, labor of love, whatever you want to call
Mhm.
it, to probably about 5 years in, we realized like, oh, this could actually be something that's more than that. And so that's kind of, on my end, I sort of jumped off into this world more permanently in 2023, where after I had led a long-term care organization for almost a decade. So yeah, been having so much fun ever since.
Awesome.
Mhm.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I don't know, Jan, if you have anything to add, but not crazy. that crazy day, like I'm sure you do remember sitting in that office of mine and me be like rattling on to you about this business we were going to start. It
I
was like
definitely
back of a
do.
napkin or something.
Yeah, I've told them before, it really has been an honor to have a backseat view of watching them grow PCU and all of the travels they've been on and their little traveling roadshow that has become really a powerhouse of amazing women that I count myself so fortunate to be able to work with now.
Mhm.
And I would tell Daphne over the years, I'm looking for that unicorn type of job where I can be still in the sector which I'm so passionate about while still being available at home for my young kids. And
Mhm.
that's what I'm fortunate to be able to do now, thanks to Daphne and Ashley. And I love working with them and the role that I get to play in their wonderful business. And one thing I love about them is no matter what sort of iteration, although iteration isn't a great word, it's just no matter what sort of growth they've been on throughout this journey, the person-centered values are the core of them, and where PCU
Mm.
began has never changed. It's always been that one common goal. So I can definitely say that from somebody who hasn't always worked for PCU, but was able to watch it grow until today as it continues to grow.
Amazing.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so if an organization wants to get involved with you guys, what does that process look like?
Um, It could be really any kind of different pathways, and maybe I'll say something just quickly, and then Jana, even just thinking about your role as the learning lead of learning and engagement, you might have something to add. But I think, just reach out really is what I would say because you can find us on our website or which I'm sure you guys will share with
Yeah.
your listeners and but we're on social media too, and we have a monthly newsletter, even if you don't necessarily know what you want, but you'd like to kind of just be kept informed as to like, the things we have going on and the different offerings that we have. But yeah, I would just say like different pathways because and again, I say this not like tongue in cheek, but we do treat our clients in a very person-centered way as well, right? So every organization or every individual is going to need something different, right? So it's a matter, and that's one of the benefits that we've always really appreciated about being a small business is that you can have the, I guess, luxury of being a bit that sort of a bit boutique service, if you will,
Mm.
right?
Yes.
And tailoring your approach to organizations that are saying like they might for I'll just say like for example, we offer one of the consulting services that we offer is we help organizations with strategic planning for long-term care homes and whatnot. And, the Cadillac version of that, from start to finish is a large service that, would span probably 6 to 8 months. But we had a nursing home approach us not that long ago. It was like, you know what, like we have some data that we've collected. We don't really have like, you know, the means to kind of go on to, nor the human capacity, like to kind of go and have this longer, process and whatnot. And so like, but we really need a new strategic plan because we haven't had one since before the pandemic. And so it's just kind of like, okay, well, why don't you just give us what you have? And, Janet and I interviewed a couple of people and then we can write it for you. Right. So just adapted, and it was, more affordable and that kind of thing.
Right.
So yeah, just depending on whatever the entry point, it makes sense. And yeah,
Yeah. And their needs.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's really
Yeah.
nice. It's really nice.
Did you say as well, Daphne, you connect with individuals in the community as well? What would that look like?
Um, yeah, so again, a couple of different ways. So we try to encompass again just in our general communication, which is our newsletter, and our social media, understanding that, that audience as well, and that they are feeling included in those. But we offer, again, from a service perspective, we offer something called dementia coaching, um, which is essentially, again, a consulting service for individuals who are in that community setting. And so we've recently expanded in the last year and a half, to kind of complementary things to that dementia coaching service, because again, it's a very individualized service and it is a consulting kind of engagement, right? So we've developed some asynchronous courses that are focused on, the individual who is living at home, and those courses, not to get into too much detail, and again, Jana, you may have something to add. I'm sure you do, but is that they're what we tried to focus on is there's a lot of when you first get a diagnosis of dementia, there are so many wonderful organizations in the world, and in communities like such as the Alzheimer's societies, across Canada or the US or wherever you're listening from. There's also Alzheimer's Association in the US and different iterations of that organization around the world. So there's all kinds of great resources and things that will happen and be given and you can access for free. And then also, system navigation kind of services that you can get in communities. So we always kind of say, like, we don't want to, we're not looking to kind of sell people things that they can get for free, for lack of a better way to say that. But we try to fill that space in between. So it's that, someone to walk that journey with you, and understand. And so sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent. That's what I do. But
So do we.
the fourth is what we try to do is not to kind of build, there's not a set of like checklists or what you should do now and all those things which you should get, and that those would be things you might get from the Alzheimer's Society, some really general education about dementia, things like that. But what we try to talk about in the courses that we've just launched recently is it's kind of that in between, and what I'm trying to like my sort of what I'm realizing is that it's kind of like the stuff that nobody talks about. So,
Hmm.
things like, how do you deal with like those decisions of autonomy, or, navigating the change in role that happens as a care partner when you're all of a
Yeah.
sudden helicoptered into this situation where you're now the primary care person for the person that's like your spouse or your mom or your dad, and, different roles in families, and, risk versus autonomy, as I said, and, different things like that. Yeah, and then we also are in development, and we have at beta phase an AI tool which sort of is intended to replicate um, that dementia coaching service. So like more of like a tailored, and that would be for individuals who are um, caring at home, like for caregivers in community. Yeah.
Is that like kind of like a helpline? Like,
It's I would say yes, kind of like a modern day helpline.
yeah.
Uh, so what
Mhm.
we've actually done, we had a small amount of funding a little over a year ago to develop. So we trained our own engine, like so an AI, which maybe sound like I'm speaking in Latin, I'm sure to many people, but we worked with a really dear colleague who is from the Netherlands, who is like pretty much a digital guru that we love. And sidebar, you should have him on your podcast. He's amazing. I'll tell you about him later. But yeah, it's so we essentially have the way that we are delivering this AI tool in a beta phase. So it's still very early, as I'm sure people can understand, like when you're developing something. It's essentially designed to be like a 24/7 kind of phone a friend, right? Like
Yeah.
chat that you can. And so what we say when we say that we've trained it, what we mean by that is we have provided, like with general AI, like if you went to chat GPT or whatever, it's trained on the entire internet, right?
Hmm.
And so you have to be really cautious, of course, where you never use AI at all, and even our tool for medical advice, but you have to be
Well,
yeah,
I
well,
don't,
yeah,
I can't say I have not done
yeah,
that.
fair. You can,
Dr. Google, but I don't
yes.
like make
Should
a
you? Should
diagnosis of
you?
it. Yeah. I'm not gonna go to the
Let me
university.
amend that and say as your only source of medical advice.
Yes, there you go.
Um, but yeah, so essentially what we did was we provided our own like body of literature
Yeah.
that
Cool.
we like that's what it means when you say to train it, right?
Yeah.
So provided like the from Bradford University and like all the really
Yes.
the Alzheimer's societies and all of that. And we've trained it and like sort of that quality control. We're trying to like make sure that the information is all kind of curated in a way that it is like valid and vetted and evidence-based information. And so then what happens is that the individuals will be able to do it. So sorry, I will finish my rant, I promise. But
Oh, amazing.
We
what
love
I'm
the rant.
yeah, good. And I'm going to let Jan get a word in edgewise. Um, but what we're doing, and I just want to say this because I just to make sure that because the reason that we've chosen to roll this tool out through organizations. So we have, nursing homes in New Brunswick, some beta clients that are offering already services in their communities, like such as outreach services, Meals on Wheels. In New Brunswick, we have something called Nursing Homes Without Walls or adult day programs. And so the reason we chose that is because we felt that it's better for the client. The end user would probably also already have these trusted relationships with, organizations, right? So they would be able to essentially like, enroll through their organization and then the tool itself can be branded like with the say if it's a nursing home that it doesn't have necessarily PCU branding. It would and we then it can also be curated for that organization with local information about services that are available and different kinds of things that are contextually appropriate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We can tailor it. So yeah, that's kind of the model right now. Definitely in the future, we will probably look at like a one-on-one model where somebody, but if anyone is listening and they are curious as a one-on-one user, they can just reach out and maybe we can talk about letting them trial it or something.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Thank you.
You
Thanks
know,
for
I
asking.
love AI.
Mm-hmm. I know we're big AI girls, so
Yeah.
we talk about it all the
Oh, I know. We talked about this the other day. We're like very AI forward. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
time. Right.
We don't want to go on that tangent.
Yeah, we could go down a rabbit hole there.
For another
Um,
day.
Jana, can you tell
Um,
us a bit more about your role and what you've experienced?
of course, yes. And just to piggyback on what Daphne was you just ended there, Daphne, saying just reach out to us if you see that. One thing about us is that if you don't see it on our offerings, definitely reach out to us because
Yes.
we are very open to working with you. As Daphne said, very person-centered. So we can do our best to curate our offerings to meet your needs. And just to mention a few of our other offerings, in addition to the super exciting ones that Daphne already talked about, we have a lot of other educational offerings, such as our podcast being another great example, which is a free example, which our intended audience really are those caregivers within community who are maybe at home with a loved one or a friend who is living with dementia and just is kind of wondering, what do I do in this moment? So we try our best to have and we have had some really amazing experts in the industry on the podcast who have shared a wealth of information on a variety of topics that I really think, and I know and have heard from listeners, have really been so meaningful to them. And I know that a lot of times Daphne and I leave those interviews feeling like we've just been in a therapy session almost from some of the guests that we've had. So I really do encourage you to take a listen to Redefining Dementia, not to give our podcast a plug on your kitchen
No.
table podcast, which so that's a really great one that I always try and mention to people because it is a great offering just to listen while you're driving around or doing laundry or whatever. But
Yeah.
we also will be offering some webinars in the future, and we hope that those will be geared more towards the professional caregivers in
Mhm.
the aging care industry. And another one that came to mind when Daphne was chatting was Dementia Understanding the Journey is also a great one for community caregivers as well as professional caregivers. But we have a wonderful facilitator of that, a few facilitators. That one will be coming up again in the fall. So that's really a wonderful one. No matter what your background is, it's really meant for everyone, anyone interested in learning more about dementia. And it is quite intensive. It's a 9-week course, but really meaningful and impactful. And what else, Daphne? Am I missing anything?
I don't think no, I think it's okay. I think I would love I mean, you should definitely tell them a little bit about your role, Jana, and like some of
Oh,
the,
for
you
sure.
know, philosophy that you because I mean, I say Jana's very humble. I'm sure you guys have noticed.
Not at all. I'm
Yeah,
joking.
really building that role as she goes in true entrepreneur style, whether she knew it or not. She was coming into a startup and so she's building this role of like a learning engagement. And I think you've really taken a really wonderful perspective on how you're putting yourself into that role. So sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, and
No.
I can riff a little bit if you need a minute to think about it.
No, not at all. And I had written those little items down while you were speaking, Daphne, because I didn't want us to forget. Not that we have to list off all of our offerings at once, but I just thought, oh, this would be good. This would be good. We go down rabbit holes, as we've said. Yeah. So my current role with Person-Centered Universe is the Learning Design and Engagement Lead, and it's a relatively new role for me. So I'm learning and growing into it, but I'm very excited about it because it gives me an opportunity to be, I guess, involved in so many different avenues that can help all of those individuals who really need and would like to learn more about how to support the people in their lives living with dementia, no matter what that looks like. So I've just been enjoying every step of the way and learning through and with people. I'm just trying to think, Daphne, about whether there's anything in particular you want me to talk about my role other than all of the our offerings. But yeah, I just think it personally it feeds my soul because when I worked in therapeutic recreation, kind of a baby activity director that Daphne hired, I really started out, people would say, don't you find that depressing to talk or
Mhm.
to work with people who are elderly or have dementia? And I would think, well, it's not for me because I learned so much. And when I was in that role and continuing to today, I would think, is this a place that I would want to live? Or is this a place I would want my family to live? And
Mhm.
if the answer to that on that day wasn't a yes, that was my always my reason for the day is what part can I play to ensure that this is a place where I would want to live, or I would want my parents to live, or a loved one. Because Daphne and I, in our role, and as so many people do who work in long-term care organizations, you do get to know those families. And perhaps we did in a different way, being on the not clinical side, because we were there in different moments, perhaps, than some of the people who worked in the more clinical side, although we respect and value their expertise, of course. So I guess all that to say is has sort of fed my soul and my work no matter what role I'm playing. And I sort of try my best to live person-centeredness as a philosophy. It's
Mhm.
not just I go to work and I look at a resident and I am going to have a person-centered, an intentional person-centered interaction with this person. Although it does take a while if you're not used to that way of thinking, I think for us it is something that comes naturally, um, because it's just a way of being. It's a way of interacting with people on a human level.
Mhm.
And although a person may have dementia, they are a person and a human who, although their mind works a little bit differently now, have lived a whole life with history and stories and so much for me to learn from them still, no matter what that looks like, no matter what matter, even if they're able to verbalize who they are as a person. So this is a roundabout way of me saying that I think no matter what role any of us are in, whether it's in a learning design and engagement lead role, or if you work making your coffee at Tim Hortons this morning, person-centeredness is a philosophy no matter the person the person's age or whoever you're speaking to.
Mhm.
So I think that's really what feeds the work that we do and that what I try and bring into my role with helping to develop current and new educational offerings is this something that I would want to learn if I was in this position of taking care of somebody who is living with dementia? So that doesn't necessarily give insight into the specifics of my role, but that's kind of where my heart is in the role, if that makes
I
sense.
love that. And honestly, the role doesn't always have to be like I do this and I produce this. It really could be something within. And I
Yeah,
love that. I love that.
and I can go into all of those details, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's what informs her
Yes.
work.
yeah,
And the well, I thought of about a billion examples, but the one example that is recent that comes to mind is a course that Jana facilitated for the first time last fall, and it was around like volunteer engagement and helping organizations. And I think safe to say you had like a bit of writer's block, or it was like you were really like struggling with like the how do I make this like translate? Like how do I make this like people connect to it? And like, she had these beautiful sessions, like I think it was 4 weeks, the course. And then all of a sudden we were having coffee one morning, like working at a coffee shop, and she like was having this aha moment of like, um, oh, like I'm gonna make, so to your point of like the person centered, like she made a lady, like an avatar kind of an individual, like a lady prototype of a volunteer. I forget the lady's name in the course, but and so this lady was like woven through all of the different courses, like of like we would always come back to this volunteer, and like if you were this late, like if you were the volunteer director that had to like onboard this volunteer or this, like anyway, that just reminded me of like that that's one of about a million ways of why that perspective shows up in Jana's
yeah.
work. And I mean, again, at the risk, I know you guys say you love rabbit holes, but this is a big one for us, so I'll just, if you want to go in a different direction, just say so. Jenna and I and Ashley and those of us who are alumni of St. Thomas University, of a certain era of years, we were blessed and continue to be blessed really by the friendship now and mentorship of two wonderful, well, many wonderful faculty members, but the two gentlemen, Dr. Bill Randall and Dr. Gary Irwin Kenyon. Gary Irwin Kenyon is actually the founder of the gerontology department at St. Thomas University. And both are now professor emeritus status, like have been awarded that in their retirement. But I guess the reason I'm bringing them up is because it's a really big insight into this worldview that Jana described. And so both Bill and Gary we're so fortunate to have them both in Atlantic, Canada, but they have been like pioneers around the world in something called narrative gerontology. And so essentially what that is it's the story of stories, like someone's life story, or narrative care was like an area that kind of emerged from that. And Jana and I were very much very lucky to be sort of on the sidelines and like actively doing work in long-term care with alongside of their mentorship, where we implemented a biography program at the home we were working at. And they were literally developing the definition of narrative care and what that means, like to kind of um, incorporate someone's story. It's not only about like, let's sit down and write your chronological biography, but it's how do you incorporate, if somebody used to be a teacher, like how can you incorporate them into
Yeah.
how, like actually, like as you're doing their care, what was their favorite music, what was their, so I like, to Jana's point, I often say always say this, like you said, it's kind of like realizing, like when you see behind the curtain, when you have this moment that you realize that a narrative, it's a perspective and it's a way that you see the world. You can't sort of unknow that, like once you see it, like so that's kind of like how you go forward and say like, oh, everybody has a story. Like we four
Yes.
all have a different story of how we got here today to this kitchen table podcast, right? Like,
Yes.
and that shapes, and then we live within, it's a whole ripple. Like we live within a family or we live within a community, and that has a story. And then that has a story. And organization, as I talked about culture, right? Like that narrative perspective also like it feeds my passion for culture in organizations, right? Anyway, I,
Yeah.
I I digress, but I will always digress when I talk about narrative. But that's
Oh,
That's
I
our
love the passion of it.
I
You can
know.
really feel it in the both of you, and you can
Yeah.
tell it really fuels what you're doing. So
Yeah.
it's amazing to listen to.
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I not to make a silly question. I know what I think about when I say person-centered care, but for listeners that may have only heard this for the first time, or they have questions about that. When you talk about person-centered care, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not going to go first this time. You go, Jana. You go first.
When
Let
you
the introvert talk.
when you were asking that question, um, I just thought, to me, it means when I think of myself and when I think of people who have treated me the most in a most person-centered way that means something to me, it's the people that have made me feel seen
Right.
and who understand, she's having a hard time in this moment because of this, or
Hmm.
she would really appreciate this, or she needs her alone time. Do you know, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
to me, it means seeing the person for who they are and understanding what they need in any given moment based on who they are as a person. As Daphne said, it goes back to their life story and the fact that your wants and needs might change from day to day.
Mhm.
And somebody who always woke up at 9 in the morning and had tea with milk and no sugar before they did anything else probably isn't going to respond in the best way if they find themselves living in long-term care and it's like lights on 6:30. I've got more people to go get up for
Yeah.
breakfast. I'll get
Time
to
for
the
a
dining
bath.
room.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to me it's how do we make that individual feel seen in that moment? Can I give her a few more minutes to have her tea with milk and no sugar, just to decompress in the morning before I interact with her? So it's just, to me, that's what it is. It doesn't have to be that complicated. It's just, again, going back to it's a philosophy of being and how would you want to be treated by another person? How would you want to feel seen? What are your needs? That's probably a simplistic answer. I probably from more than what Daphne's going to
No,
say,
No, that's
philosophical.
perfect.
not at all. It's I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Also, I'm just like bringing something up just so I can um yeah, I'm just looking at the questions. I'm
No
peeking at
worries.
but so I would agree with everything you just said. Like and so what I would say is it's that, everything Jana like is knowing the person and like incorporating like it's what you kind of said and building from what you said is like it's one thing to know it, but then to act on, to ensure that those, like you say, how do they like their coffee or what time did they normally get up and incorporating those things consistently into
Yeah.
a care plan, right? So it's like having that the person is at the center with everybody on the team or whatnot is, considering that who is that unique person and how can we support that personhood of that person, right? Like through in a situation where often they've been, they've had a lot of losses of of the individuality and unfortunately as a around stigma, like there is still a very prevailing stigma around specifically a dementia diagnosis, but even individuals who are finding themselves needing long-term care, like people are afraid of long-term care, they don't want to put my mom and dad into a home or, those kinds of things. And so as a result, there are actual losses and perceived losses of that personhood and like what they've had to give up, what they've, their home, their car, their morning routine, their whatever the case, their dog, their pet, their spouse, like coming in, living in, in the situation. And so how can we incorporate that and honor those stories of the person in the day-to-day and practical ways that will help? That's kind of like for me the essence of person-centered care. Now I would say again, like I won't get on too much of a soapbox, but I think about, for example, one of a million examples, but a colleague of ours who we interviewed actually in the first season of our podcast. And he's one of my favorite people on planet Earth, I think. His name's Jim Mann. He's an individual who was diagnosed with dementia, had a dementia diagnosis at the age of 58, and has spent and is still a tireless advocate, and he travels across the country and even has been, engaged in initiatives around the world to help this very thing is like supporting the understanding of a person's personhood and like their capabilities, right? So, he told a story, one of many, but on the podcast, and he was on that first season, and he was talking about how there was a friend of his that he used to golf with, right? And at the golf club, and he lives in British Columbia. And the individual got a diagnosis of, I think it was Alzheimer's disease. I could be dementia of some kind of
Yeah.
dementia. And this was the person who used to like, organize the men's nights at the, coffee. And he would, keep the score of the record of the score at the golf club. And, on the day after he got diagnosed and he came in, and once people learned that, well, they said like, well, don't worry about the men's night anymore. Like, we'll look after that. And, don't worry about the score. Like, like, so it was like Jim's point, and this is the point, like, is that in the 12 hours or 24 hours, like since he got the diagnosis, he didn't change, right? He has a diagnosis now of whatever dementia it is, but he still has the ability to do things. You don't automatically just like wave a magic wand and some of those things change. Like, so there are still abilities, and people
Oh, yeah.
do have like strengths and abilities. And so incorporating that into care planning and like building from those things, right, is what person-centered care is also about.
Yeah. Just don't fit them into this one box. Like now they have dementia and now they are in this box and that's it. That's all. Yeah.
Uh, just because they come into like we have another, actually he's also named Jim, a different Jim, who uses the analogy of Jim Kinsey. He is has worked with organizations around culture change for many couple of decades at least. And he will often use the analogy of like we being the people who work in long-term care.
Hmm.
It's kind of like the magical, he jokes and says it's like the magical vestibule. Like they come through the vestibule of the front door, and all of a sudden, we expect that they're going to fit into our routines of our schedule and our meal times and our activities and our services and different things. And all of a sudden they, again, everything that, again, I'm not trying to be negative, but it's kind of funny if you work in long-term care, because when
Yeah.
you think about it, it's quite absurd actually.
Yeah,
Like,
it really is.
yeah, yeah, there's that culture piece again, right? Like that culture of routines and the institutional clock and all of
Yeah.
those things. But, yeah.
Well, that's really insightful. I really appreciate both of your viewpoints on that.
Yeah.
We've reached time already. We're gonna have to do this again because this was
Uh,
just fabulous, and I can tell we could talk for days about all of this. But I wanted to thank you both, and I'm sure Stephanie does as well, for coming
Yeah.
on and providing what services you have and giving your perspective. It's been
Yeah.
very, very
oh
Yeah,
good.
I
gosh.
would love a part two and like
Yeah.
dive in and more of like the like dementia itself. Like I love like now that we know that the backstory and how listeners can get involved. Like but I would love a part two to dive
Absolutely.
more in like dementia care. And I'm
That's
sure that
cool.
there's been personal stories from both of you. And yeah, I would love to do to be continued part two more of dementia itself.
I love that. I love that. I would anytime, and you guys are going to come on our podcast as
Yeah.
well, I hope.
Yeah.
And we, um,
Chats to be continued.
That's to be continued.
so much for having us. We appreciate you guys.
Yes,
And
thank you.
love you. Like, thank you for doing your podcast, because it's amazing to have that, those kind of informal resources that people can tap into, like just as they're driving to work or,
100%.
yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
it's awesome.
without having to like sit, like they can do it on their own, person-centered on their own time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
All
thank
right,
you.
guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Right.